Hello, I'm Gonzalo, gmhacker, or whatever, and I work at Immunefi, and today I'll talk to you about Solidity's most common pitfalls, common security pitfalls. For those of you who don't know, Immunefi is a bug bounty platform hosting some of the largest DeFi projects, blockchain projects. So this talk will be mostly from that point of view. As I work at Immunefi, I get to see the bug reports that get disclosed to Immunefi, and yeah, it will be mostly based on that. Okay, so a little bit of just background. The typical protocol security path is, well, you develop some code, okay? In this case, let's just look at Solidity. So the smart contract developers develop the Solidity. Then you have some audits, security reviews, whatever. And that's basically a third party that's specialized in trying to break your protocol, essentially. And hopefully this is just not just a rubber stamp for the community to accept your protocol, rather it's a way to harden your code before it goes to production. And as a last resort, you have a bug bounty, kind of a last line of defense in case vulnerabilities get past the audit stage. You have that last resort to incentivize the security community to work like something like vigilantes looking at your code, and they are incentivized to report, to disclose to you potential vulnerabilities and front-run exploiters, essentially. Yeah, and you see bugs on both stages, by the way. I'm not sure if I ever saw a protocol that didn't get reported bugs on the bug bounties. So even that, So even that, I mean, even though you do not see it, vulnerabilities always get past the audit stage, even if they are low vulnerabilities. And that's just normal stuff. That's just part of the coding process. Is not like every protocol developer sucks or is bad at their job. It's just the way it is. Okay, so coming back to the topic here, let's first look at the pitfalls that are most commonly found in the auditing stage. So this is like a top 3 common vulnerabilities. I didn't read all the audit reports in the world, so this is a little bit opinionated, but the vulnerabilities are specifically regarding Solidity. Not like, it doesn't mean that it's just found in Solidity, but it's not like business logic vulnerabilities, not just EVM specific vulnerabilities, etc. Okay, so first one that is still common, even though Solidity is 0.8, etc., is overflow and underflow. I'm going to show you a few examples. This first one, do you read it? Yeah, I think so. Was found on Code Arena. This was 2 years ago. So in this case, it was Solidity before 0.8. You just had a casting to integer, and before casting, you were doing a subtraction where the number would underflow and it will wrap around and not revert. So yeah, that's the typical bug before Solidity is 0.8. Then you have Solidity 0.8, but you still have those unchecked blocks that you can use when you are confident that you are not going to overflow, but still sometimes you put unchecked blocks where you shouldn't, and here is a spearbit finding where it will potentially underflow. Once again, here, also just also spearbit. Just you have an addition, and it's a safe addition, but then each branch is using a library to do an unsafe addition, and again, it can wrap the number without reverting the overflow. And as a final one, just like the other side of the coin, once you have the overflow revert, sometimes you are not supposed to let your transaction revert, but it does get revert if somebody can force an overflow. In this case, the attacker could stake, then force and stake, and then stake, and it turns out that that operation, that subtraction, would always underflow and revert the transaction, therefore like a sort of DOS situation where you could never use again the function. That's basically it. The second one is the dreadful rounding errors, very common, and you'll see that's also extremely common in the bug bounty world. This vulnerability was found by Hans Fries. Basically, it's this sort of pattern where you have critical functions changing your state, and you always do this invariant check, okay, which is a very interesting pattern. The problem here is that you have that mol div, which is cool, but then you have a multiplication afterwards. You are trying to scale everything to 18 decimals. I believe that's what it was doing here. But you do a multiplication, then a division, then a multiplication, and the point being that you lose precision with the rounding error. You should be doing all the multiplications first, and then the division. This is extremely common. This is just another one. This was found by Trust. You have this complex calculation, and usually when you have this complex math, most security researchers just don't want to approach it. They shy away a little bit from it. This is not complex math, but it just looks a little bit dreadful. And you had that small chunk inside where you were doing a division, and afterwards, if you see on the first snippet, you are multiplying by 2 raised to 96, and due to discrepancies in decimals in the prices, you know, sometimes due to tokenomics, some coin might have a value of a ton of decimals if they have like 1 trillion tokens circulating, and then some other coin might just have a small number of token circulation, therefore the price is big, and yeah, you would also have a rounding error here. The last one that you find on audits, I called it external call methods madness. It's just the fact that you in Solidity have these different ways of using the call opcode, essentially different functions that wrap around the call opcode. By now the community has like established like these are pretty much deprecated sort of, so they are always reported on audits, but sometimes they do have like meaningful impact. Here, for example, somebody could deposit money, but if it's a smart contract account depositing money, when they try to withdraw, they might not be able actually to withdraw, and especially relevant as the industry moves towards account abstraction. Here it's similar, but in this case we are using send. Again, transfer and send have this gas limitation, so I think here it was just a normal transfer of funds, but either way it was flagged just because it might not work with smart contract accounts. Not as critical as the first one. And here is the other side of the coin. So if you use the low-level call, it's actually a bit more tricky because you need to remind yourself that it doesn't revert if the transaction fails. So you need to check whether the call was successful. This was a bug found by Spearbit as well. The other ones were found on Code Arena. And yeah, basically that's it, what I call external call methods madness. Okay, so now let's go to the pitfalls that you find in the wild, not the hacked ones, but the ones that are found on Immunefi. And this is, again, just based on reports that you see on Immunefi. I'll show some screenshots of reports. They will be censored just because I cannot disclose them, unfortunately. But yeah. This one actually is public. This was a recent bug found on Balancer. And yeah, this is the first common vulnerability specific to Solidity, kinda, which is rounding errors. This is like the #1 vulnerability that gets past the auditing stage, which is very interesting to know. And in this case, the white hat got paid $1 million. and it was just the fact that these linear pools, you were allowed to exchange the wrapped token that was accruing value with the actual underlying, but due to a rounding error, you could just you could basically exchange one way of the wrapped token and only deduct from your balance one way of the underlying, and you were therefore extracting value from the pools. Anyways, you were, because this is just a combination of factors in this specific case, where flash swaps didn't have fees, so you could swap very small amounts, like one way. And yeah, it turns out that they're like, I think 20% of the TVL, so like 250 million or something, were at risk if the hacker had a lot of money also to leverage. Number two is reentrancy, so that didn't disappear yet. It's kind of like the most known vulnerability, even non-technical people know about it, but it's still not as straightforward to completely solve it. This is the first one, this is from a bug report, and this is like the most simple possible reentrancy. This was found very, very recently actually, so not like when the industry was not mature or whatever. It was very recent, and this is the typical example that when you are teaching about reentrancy to Solidity developers, this is a typical example. There was a withdraw function, it lacked a reentrancy guard, so you can call it multiple times and drain the contract. This is a less easy, sorry for so many red blocks there, but this is a less easy reentrancy. What happened here? Basically, you could deploy a vault with whatever token you would like. And in this specific case, what the attacker could do is they could craft a malicious token that in transfers, the typical ERC20 transfers, you would do a callback to the receiver. So the assumption of the developer that developed the vault code is that, well, it's a transfer function from the ERC20, it doesn't have callbacks, therefore I don't need to be worried about reentrancy. So it turns out that you could do a malicious token that would do that callback, and cannot get much into it, but there was logic that tied multiple vaults. So because you could do that reentrancy on your malicious vault, you could then cause impact to other vaults that had actual value. Yeah, cannot give more details. And a third one, that's very interesting, that's been appearing on Immunefi. Yeah, it's called the return bomb. I'm not sure if that's the technical term, but essentially when you do a low-level call in Solidity, even if you don't put like bool success and then bytes memory data, still that data gets loaded up into memory. You can only avoid this if you go to assembly, you do the call. If you go to assembly, then you need to do the copy of the return data explicitly. But if you do it in Solidity, even it just copies that to the memory. So when you have protocols they're not supposed to let transactions revert. For example, bridges. This was a bridge, by the way, and they let me disclose it, but I just don't remember what's the name of the protocol. But yeah, because the transaction of the relaying transaction was not supposed to revert, but the attacker had control of the receiver of the message, therefore they could do a return bomb where they would return a huge amount of data, and that would drain the entire gas of the transaction, causing it to revert. That's basically it. Yeah, the Nomad guys did this pattern called the excessively safe call, where you just go to assembly and check the size of the return data first. You might think that everybody uses 0.8, but still there are some people that don't use it. You see that on the recent Solidity team's survey. And And I think, this is my opinion, the Solidity 0.8 change of by default checking overflow is generally a very positive change. You can use unchecked if you don't want the checks, basically. Gas optimizers might hate me for that, but I would just advise not to use it if your protocol is not terribly in need for gas optimizations, because yeah, I've seen various times just potential overflow in that unchecked. Or maybe you might just need to use fixed point. Not that the fixed point type solves rounding errors, but it might be useful for your protocol and might help you catch those rounding errors fast. And there are not a lot of people using fixed point types, but you have those, PRB math, the one from Soulmate. Custom implementation, I would not advise you to do a custom implementation, but anyways. Also, this is like a general discussion, right? Should Solidity add like a default non-reentrant lock into external calls? The Viper guys discussed that for Viper. I think they might be implementing that. And thank you. And yeah, you also have like the other side of the coin. This is also a bug found on Immunefi, where a lock was causing a DOS, right? Because an external call was doing you had this sequence where you locked the state, and then you were trying to call a function that also had that lock, so it would never work. In my opinion, I think it would be a generally positive impact, just because of the amount of reentrancy bugs that I see on Immunefi, but yeah, just it's a discussion. And obviously, like final suggestion is just, well, testing. You've heard about testing today. You should test the code. I know that seems obvious, but it's not. Use proper tooling. You have Slider, Echidna, Mithril, etc. You can use also the Certor Approver if you want to dive into formal verification. Just generally unit testing. Sometimes that is missing, which might be surprising. Audits. You really need to have third parties looking into your code that are specialized in just security vulnerabilities, essentially. And they are just somebody else with no bias. So even if you know more deeply your protocol, sometimes they just find other states that you were not expecting to have. And as a last line of defense, hopefully also launch a bug bounty so that your code hardens with time and the security community front runs the exploiters, basically. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any questions in the room? Yes, here's one. Do you?
Hey, nice talk, thanks. So as the contracts get bigger, are there any interesting like gas denial of service attacks that you're seeing? Are those getting more popular?
Interesting what, sorry?
Gas denial of service.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so I think what's generally becoming more popular really are these rounding errors, honestly. It's just that tying into what you said, as the code gets bigger, there are also larger chunks of math calculations. They are not necessarily complex. It's not necessarily complex math. It's just a bit scary to look at it when it's in code format. Some protocols do like very nicely just kind of comments where they put the calculations in a better visual way. And I think that's very helpful for the security researcher, that specifically a white hat on a bug bounty, where basically they look at a too complex of a just math chunk, they just decide to skip it. But actually, the elite hackers on Immunefi are the ones that jump into that, just break it into simple parts and find it. So that's been very common. DOS is also common, I think, but mostly only in protocols where transactions should not be able to revert. Yeah.
Any more questions? If not, I say give it up for gmhacker. Thank you so much.